Welcome in, Bronco Nation. Today we're going to be looking at the passing strengths and weaknesses on both the offensive and the defensive end from the spring game. So the defensive backs, I think, had some strengths and had some weaknesses. There were some really nice pass breakups, which we'll go over and we'll look at here in a second. But there were also a couple times when they would get blown by with the receivers. And part of that, it was just kind of them biting a little too hard, moving up towards the receiver when the receiver was just kind of gunning it right past them. And so there's a little bit of that to be worked on, I think. But overall, I think the defensive backs did pretty good. To me, it's still a little hit or miss. But when they are on their guy, they're doing a really good job of actually breaking up the passes. I see a little bit of ferocity in their mentality. They get in there and they try to break up those passes really nicely. So let's jump in looking at some of these pass plays. We're going to look at some of the what I would call passing successes first, and we're going to start off with one of the kind of long bombs. There were a couple long shots in this game, some missed opportunities and some that were successful. And this is one that was pretty successful. So a nice deep post pass and some nice moves after the play as well. Now, one thing I want you guys to notice on this is the defensive backs are all in a zone coverage. So they start spreading out. And this wide receiver does a really good job of noticing that. He runs his post assignment and cuts it in a way where he gets right into the open space, gets himself open for that pass. So some nice route running there. I think that receiver is able to recognize that, they're in zone and use that space a little bit. Um, and the other thing I'm seeing on this is if we watch this defensive back on the far right, he's actually doing a really good job of kind of staying between people. Once he sees the pass go out, he starts to move over and go for the tackle. So he's doing a really good job of being in position. Now, this does leave this guy on the far left wide open. And at this time, when he starts to really bite, the pass is already out. So he's not really, losing too much. But up until then, he kind of does, I don't know, I guess he turns a little bit early to follow that guy. And I think this guy on the sideline would have been a nice pass too. So we have basically two guys here, one in the middle and one on the sideline that both could have been good targets. Um, but overall, I think decent coverage by the defense. They were in their zones and stuff. This guy, as soon as as soon as the wide receiver enters his zone, he moves into position, and it's just a bit too slow. So pretty good overall there. I think that was a pretty decent play. So the next one I want to look at is a scramble and throw. And this one I was pretty impressed with. I think this is Herrera throwing, and I could be wrong about that. Um, it's either Herrera or Cutforth, and it's hard to tell in this video which one it is. But they do a really good job of seeing the pressure and cutting into this gap and scrambling out. And while doing that, looking downfield, finding the receiver and throwing for a reception. So we'll watch it in full speed here. And I think as far as quarterback play, this was one of the most impressive quarterback plays that I saw. And way to come down with it on that wide receiver. As soon as he makes that catch, he's getting nailed before he even really comes down, and he does a good job of holding on to it. So that was really nice to see. Now, one thing I did notice, there were a couple sideline throws that were just a little long and put the receiver out of bounds, and just barely. Some of these I was like, I don't even know if he really was out of bounds. This was a nice deep pass, a back shoulder pass. When I saw that in person, I thought it was in. Like right there, it's hard to tell, but I think he is just barely out. I think this was a good call. Like right there, I can't tell if he's got his foot down or not. But overall, great catch. It's just he needs to be a little more aware of that sideline, I think. But he did a good job of getting his feet down. If he had just been, 6 inches or a foot back further, he would have been in bounds. And the thing I really want to mention about um, this is cut forth throwing. He does a nice job of actually back shouldering this. So what I mean by back shoulder, for those of you that don't know that term, is he's basically going to throw the ball back a little bit and over here, right where the defender can't really reach it. So the defender is running to try to stay with this guy, and because cut forth throws the ball a little bit behind the receiver, which is not a bad throw. That's what he intends to do on this. The receiver is going to cut back to go for that ball and jump up, and you'll see the DB blows right past him, and it gains him that separation that he needs to make the catch. This is something Fernando Mendoza did a lot last year, and one of the things that made him really successful as a quarterback. And we will look at a couple other examples of this where I felt like they should have done a back shoulder throw and they didn't. Um, but that right there is a great example of a back shoulder throw and something that we can definitely use to our advantage. It's just he was a little out of bounds on this one. So overall, really good pass there. Let's go ahead and look at a touchdown. The quarterback does a good job of leading him and getting it to a spot where only he can reach it, but it's a little far out of bounds. And you can see everybody celebrating. It's a touchdown. It's really hard to tell on this one. And because of that, I actually got a replay of it off of the big board here. So, like right about there, he's got a toe down, and I could be wrong on that. So, really hard to tell if this was inbounds or out of bounds off of the angles we got, but they did call it out of bounds. But overall, once again, a nice kind of leading corner play. Um, I've been noticing that they've been doing a lot of those types of fade plays. So we're going to look at one more that was a little more successful. And you'll notice this wasn't quite as far into the end zone. Not as like sideline driven. And this is Rashawn Jones, one of the guys that everyone's been talking about. We can see here, he starts to blow right past him. And then slows down and comes back and does basically a one-handed catch to bring this in, falling into the end zone for a touchdown. Really good play by the wide receiver. I think this shows his capabilities and what he can do for us. Just all around the field, I can imagine him getting up for those 50-50 balls. So here's one where I think they could have thrown a back shoulder and they didn't. And I think if they had, this would have been an easy catch for him. And he ends up dropping this, does not come down with it. And we'll see, he does a great job of bouncing off the DB right here. Kind of gives a nice little shove to get some separation and starts blowing past him. Now right here, same thing. Cut forth, I believe, is throwing on this. Tries to lead him. And he does a good job of it. This isn't a bad pass by any means or anything like that. And the DB does an amazing job of jumping and getting his hand in right here to break this pass up. So really good work by the DB, and I think this is one of the strengths of the DBs I was talking about earlier. They're doing a really good job of when they're on their guy, they're breaking up passes. They're being aggressive with that. I know he doesn't turn his head around or anything, and that was kind of a complaint in some past years. But in those past years when they weren't turning their head around, a lot of times they were just not even really getting their hand in there effectively. He does a really good job of seeing that the wide receiver is looking for the ball and it's coming. And he does a really good job of getting his hands up with the wide receiver to break it up. So I think a good pass breakup overall. I think the wide receiver probably could have come down with it, but it's a hard catch to make with the DB all over you and his hands in the way. Now, This is where I'm saying we should have thrown a back shoulder throw here. And this is something that's kind of on the quarterback. You know, the wide receiver doesn't have much to do with this. In a back shoulder throw, the wide receiver is kind of responsive to it. And the quarterback helps him gain that separation by leading him back a little bit. So if instead of leading him and trying to kind of hit him right on the dot, if he had instead thrown it back here just a little bit, and that wide receiver had stopped and come back just a hair, done kind of a stopping jump for the ball, the DB would have probably blown past him a little bit and not been able to make that play as well. So this is where that back shoulder throw that brings him back would have been very, very effective and probably would have secured a catch. And I think that's something that the quarterbacks could be working on a little bit. It's not something we see them doing very often, but when they do, like what we saw earlier, it's very effective. So this was just the perfect play where I would say, a back shoulder is what was needed, and it wasn't there. So we're going to go in and talk about some other defensive strengths. So there's some good 50-50 attempts, both from the wide receivers and the DBs. I think these are good plays on both sides of the ball. Like right here, the wide receiver was kind of in the right spot, but the DB gets his hand just perfectly in there where he's able to break this pass up and make it so that the wide receiver can't come down with it. So really great 50-50 breakup. It was a good attempt by the offense, I think. Um, but DB just played it very well. And once again, this is the strength I see from the DBs. When they're on their guy, they're great at breaking it up. Another great example of it. So we have a guy coming in here, makes a cut, and has a little bit of leverage on his guy, but the DB does a great job of staying with him through that cut and then jumping, making a diving swat on the ball to break up that pass. Like that's just prime DB coverage right there. That is what we need. And once again, this is the strength I see from the DBs. When they're talking about how good these DBs have been doing and stepping up and all that, I think this is what they're talking about. So some really good work there. We need to see more and more and more of that. That's the thing that I think is going to help us really win some games, is that strong defense on the DBs. And we'll talk more about the defensive line and the linebackers and how good they're looking. I think, honestly, they look better than the DBs. That's the strength of our defense, is the line and the linebackers. So I want to look at this one. This is a deep ball that gets dropped, unfortunately. Madsen leads him just a little bit too far. But he was right there, and he could have come down with it. So really, really close play. Now, this is where I see the DBs struggling a little bit, right? There's two things here I want to point out. The strength of the offense and the weakness of the defense, both showing on this play. So the offense, we want to watch this wide receiver right here. He does a really good job of making a cut and then blowing right past this guy. He kind of fakes right here like he's about to go outside, and then boom, cuts inside and just darts in. So really nice job there. Now, on the other side of the ball, the DB bites on this a little too hard. He starts really going in, towards that outside to block it, and just completely lets him by, and then he's not quite able to catch up. I will say this DB is very quick, because you can see even with the head start the wide receiver gets, he starts covering ground and catching up to him. So good attempt there to get back in the play by the DB, but just not able to do it. And I think this is where I see the deficiencies in the DBs right now. They tend to bite a little too hard in certain instances and let some guys open. And if this was a little bit if this was Oregon that they were playing, that's a touchdown. I think most teams, this is a touchdown. Just so happened he was led just a hair too far. Um, you can see even when he gets up, he holds his hands up like, so close. But it really exposes, I think, that one weakness of the DBs that I saw a couple times. There were a couple big passes like this where the DBs just bit a little hard. So I think that's something that we need to watch out for. Now, one of the things I did see them doing quite a bit on pass offense is shallow ins. So a shallow in is where the wide receiver basically cuts into the middle of the field under the defense and is able to get that pass. And sometimes this is used as a primary thing, and sometimes it's used as a last resort for the quarterback. So right here, we're going to watch this wide receiver over on the left. We can see he starts running, and then boom, cuts in, and is kind of right underneath these guys, but over this guy, finds himself in a pocket, and the quarterback gets it right to him. And this is something that I see quite a bit. And here's another good example of this. And I think this shows, I believe this is cut forth again. And it shows the capability of him to scan the field and then go to his check down receivers. So right here, he snaps it. He's looking deep. And right about here is when he starts switching off of these wide receivers. So let's look at what he sees. We have this guy in the middle, covered, right? He's got one guy on him and another guy waiting in the zone he's about to run to. We've got this guy over on the left, might blow by him, but is pretty well covered. I think that's going to be a risky throw. And then we have this guy who's also pretty much covered. The safety back, or sorry, this cornerback does a really good job of switching roles. He starts to cover him, and this other guy drops outside to cover the wide receiver out there. So pretty much everybody's covered. This wide receiver is a bit open, but you can see that DB is running over there. And if he had tried to pass to him, he could have broken it up. He probably could have gotten over there in time. So, like right about here, he sees what's all happening. And then he turns and decides to throw it to his check down guy, which is his running back, I believe. Give it to him for some short yardage. They get about, I don't know, 4 yards or so. So, you know, I think that shows his capability of looking all around the field, diagnosing very quickly whether his guys are going to be able to get open or are covered, and then resorting to his check down. And here's another example. We saw a lot of this in past years too. I think this is kind of a core part of their game plans. But we have a nice little flat out for Rashawn Jones. He gets some decent yardage. I think he pretty much goes and gets a first down on this. Really, really close to, at least. Um, there is one thing I want you guys to look at, and that is the running back on the other side. I know this is designed to go to the flat out. All the defense sees it, and everybody starts running over. But this does leave the running back just wide open with nobody on that other side of the field. And I think there is a potential right here. Like a lot of times when I'm designing plays, I'll do a play like this, and then I'll do another play that runs almost exactly the same, but the running back is as the primary target. And that way the defense doesn't really know which one you're going to do, and you can surprise them. You can run this play like 2 times, and they start to get used to it. You know what I mean? They start to see this a couple times throughout the quarter or whatever. They start to be able to predict it, and that's when you pull the other one. And then this guy starts to roll out. He stops and turns around right about here and dumps it off to the running back who's making a run right out here. So there's an opportunity there to get a little creative and a little deceptive with the defense. I think this flat out play, to the wide receiver here is a standard play that they use quite often. And I think by adding some variety to it and going the other route at times, it could be pretty effective. So that's just some of the passing strengths. There's been a couple overthrows. We're gonna look at those real quick here. There's definitely some weaknesses in accuracy, um, and just reading the defense a little bit. I think especially some of these younger quarterbacks like Cutforth, Herrera, Jackson, they're definitely still picking that up a bit. Madsen is a little bit better at that. I think that's one of the things that kind of helps him to stand out. So right here, he pretty much just throws it to no one. He's dumping the ball off. I can't even tell if he is getting rid of the ball, because I feel like if he was getting rid of the ball, he'd throw it out of bounds more. I think he's going for this guy right here. And the reason I think that is not just because he doesn't throw it fully out of bounds, but if we watch the quarterback here, he stops and he loads up and aims a bit to get it over there. I don't know if he just thought that wide receiver was going to be able to get there or what, but I do want to point something out here. So he comes back, he starts to load up. Now, right here, he's throwing the ball way over here, right? I'm not sure why. Look at the wide receiver right in the middle of the field. There's nobody on him. There's nobody on him. He's got a wide open lane right down the middle. And I think if right about here when he starts to throw it, if he just gets it out quicker and throws a line drive right down the middle, this could be a really great pass play. But for some reason he throws it all the way to the sideline. And I think maybe this rusher got his hand on it. That's all I can think of. Maybe he was going for the middle, but this guy kind of gets his hand on his arm a little bit. I don't think he does, but I could be wrong. And just throws him off a bit. I don't know. It's hard to tell on this one. But when I saw this in person, I was like, who is he throwing it to? Like, he's kind of going in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, I don't think that rusher quite gets his hand on him, on his arm or anything. So this one was a little confusing to me in person. And there's a couple of them like that. Here's another kind of version of that. This is Cutforth. Throws it just out of bounds. And I don't know if he just saw pressure coming and dumped it off and got rid of it and was hoping, hey, maybe this guy can jump and catch it. But if not, it's a safe throw out of bounds, right? But once again, I want to show you guys, look at this receiver on the left. He cuts in and gets down under the defense there, and he's really got the lead on his guy. Now, just like that pass breakup we looked at earlier, the defensive back definitely could have made a play on this, but I think that's a possible completion, and we can see that the wide receiver actually had a bigger gap until he starts slowing down because the pass was out. But I think he might have been able to throw it to this guy here and gotten a pretty good completion. So once again, a little bit of not seeing the field, a little bit of misreads by Cutforth. Um, I feel like at the end of last year when he was playing, I didn't see that quite as much from him every now and then. But during this spring game, I saw it quite a few times. I have quite a few examples of that from him. So kind of interesting. Here's another one that's kind of a bad read. This one, I believe, is Maddox. He snaps it, fakes the handoff, and immediately gets it out to this quick hook. This is probably even like an option where the quarterback could hand it off or could dump it out to a short hook. Now, there's once again a good and a bad side to this because we're playing ourselves, right? The DB over here does a really great job of sitting down and getting up there to break this up. So great job by the defense. But the thing I want to look at here is he's throwing to this guy. We had waited just a fraction of a second. we have this guy wide open, right? And when I was looking at this footage, and like I said, this is hard to blame on Maddox because this is a designed play that's supposed to go to this guy. You know what I'm saying? This guy lets his rusher right past and goes to try to block this linebacker or yeah, linebacker who really doesn't come in at all. He doesn't bite. And I don't, like I said, like this guy's not trying to block him. But I think it's part of the play design that he lets him pass and instead, starts moving into block. I think probably in case they hand it off to the running back or something. But just interesting. Maybe it's an opportunity to do like an alternative play, like I was talking about earlier, where you run this play and then you do an alternative that looks very similar, but operates slightly differently on that front and instead goes to the flat. But what I'm saying here is if this guy had blocked him, the running back could have picked this guy up and it would have given Madsen just a little more time to read. Right here, look at the DB, and the DB is completely turned around and running downfield. So obviously he's not going to be able to cover the flat that's about to stop. And I think he could have seen that even just before he starts passing. He's coming out of his play action. He could see this guy's fully turned around and running upfield and, getting prepared to cover deep. And if they had thrown it to the flat here, we would have gotten quite a few more yards, I think, out of that. And this guy could have possibly even blocked him and gone for a touchdown. So there's an opportunity there. Anyways, just an interesting play I really wanted to take a look at with you guys. This is one of the few accuracy issues we saw from Madsen. There were, I mean, this really was the main one. There weren't a lot of bad accuracy things from him. There was the one where he barely overthrew him deep. Um, I think that's just getting a little bit used to the new receivers and figuring out that relationship with them a little. Um, but this one is the only real just plain bad accuracy that I saw from him today. And this reminds me a lot of like some of the clutch plays where he's on the run last year and he would throw it low or behind a guy or something. One of the things is if you guys watch my channel, I complained a lot about, but he's in the pocket, dumps it off, and just doesn't throw it to the guy. He kind of throws it a little far. And I want to say he was expecting. You can see this guy kind of the receiver that's dumping out. I think tight end probably. He's slowing down a little, preparing to catch that pass. And I think Madsen was probably expecting him to just keep running towards that sideline. And that's why that little bit of extra lead happened. So maybe a relationship thing again, getting used, building the rapport with the receivers and being able to read each other a little bit. But that was the only real time that I saw an accuracy, like a true accuracy issue from Madsen. Something to point out because I know that's a talking point with everyone right now. This one, I want to take a look at this play. This to me just feels like bad play design. This is to me something that goes back to Potter. This is a basic, it's a common play. Let's just say it that way. It's basically a dual corner play. So we start with a lot of guys kind of right in the middle. Nobody really wide out. And then the two receivers are going to run corners. So they're going to run up the field and then out towards the sideline. This guy's going to do the same thing on the other side. They run up and then boom, right there, they both cut outwards. DBs do a really great job, once again, giving credit where it's due. DBs do a great job of following their guys and staying close. Good tight coverage. And this gives Madsen nowhere to go. He just has to throw it away. And the hope is basically one of these wide receivers is able to beat their guy. Preferably this guy on the far side, I think, because he's rolling that way. But once again, I just don't like this play design. I think it limits his opportunities to get the ball out. He's really relying, I mean, he can't really throw it to this guy. It's very hard to make, when you're rolling out to one way to turn around and try to dot it deep to the other side of the field. It's a pretty hard pass for almost anyone to make. Um, so I think that really just leaves one guy that he can hit, you know. And this whole thing is basically relying on the play action and to try to get these guys on this far side, these DBs, to bite and start to roll over to follow the running back. And if they do that, then that guy is open, right? And that's what they're hoping for. That's what they're relying on. And basically, this whole play is designed around that. These guys bite, hopefully, on the run, and that gets this guy open on the corner, and you've got a nice deep pass. But once again, I just feel like this play limits the opportunities to get the ball to someone. And the other thing is, if we watch this play action to the running back, which is what this whole play relies on, it's not very good. um, by the time the running back fakes the grab, Madsen has already grabbed the ball in. He's no longer faking it. They're feet away from each other. So it's just not very convincing to me. He fakes it, starts to pull it in, and then the running back fakes the grab, and they're so far away from each other during that exchange. The linebackers kind of bite a little bit, but you'll notice that's one thing that makes them really good once we start looking at the run plays. They're really good at biting on run plays and then realizing when it's not and getting back and doing their job in the downfield. And you'll see right here, they start to move forward when they see it might be a run. And as soon as they realize it's not, when Maddox pulls it in, boom, they stop and start to switch assignments very quickly. In fact, this guy right here does an amazing job at nope, it's not a run, switches direction, and he immediately bursts of speed to block the running back or to block the quarterback from making a run for it. So, great play by the defense. Not so good on the offense. A bad PA, bad play action on the run, basically a bad fake run, is what I mean by PA. So bad on that. Limits the opportunities to get the ball to someone. And then the read, he might have been able to get to Rashawn, but it's just safer to throw it away at that point. I just feel like this play design is a little boring and limiting. This is something I feel like Potter needs to work on. I think plays like this that are limiting are not very beneficial to Boise State. I feel like it's not really something that is going to help us win games. If that play works, then it works and it's awesome. But there's only one shot of it. There's one guy that can make it work. And if that DB that's covering him doesn't bite on that run, which he's the furthest from the run, so it's kind of like there's a lot of other guys there that can get the run. So I think more likely than not, he probably won't bite on the run. But if he does, it's a good play. If he doesn't, the whole play is blown up. So it's just very limiting. And I feel like there's better plays out there to be running than something like that. Um, so I don't know, not too impressed with that play call. The DBs, really great job of breaking up passes. For the most part, they stay on their guys and they get their hands in there. So really great job there. I think their opportunity would be not biting too hard on certain predictions of routes, and instead being a little more responsive and sticking to your guy. We saw that on the deep play where he just bites a little hard thinking he's about to go out. And then as far as wide receivers, I think wide receivers are doing a good job. We saw some nice 50-50 jump plays. Some they didn't necessarily come down with, but some really good attempts to come down with them. It looks a little more like they know what they're doing. They just need to lock it down a little more with the hands. What I saw from Rashawn Jones this game was really good. People have been talking him up a lot. And I think he proved it out there from what I saw. He didn't get quite as many targets as I expected him to get, but the ones he did get, he made some pretty good moves. The one end zone catch where he kind of came down one handed 50-50 catch, I think was a really nice one. I think that's a good example of what he can bring to this team. We need a receiver that's bigger bodied like that can make those 50-50 catches. And he does have the speed as well. And if we get him the ball a little sooner, on the short type routes, he's able to make some guys miss and stuff as well. And then Terrius Favors, I think, got like 6 targets in this game, which was, I believe, the most of any receiver. So I think he's doing a good job of finding that open space. He's getting those targets because he's open. He's finding that open space, and he's another guy where if we get him the ball, he's able to make some guys miss. He's very shifty and very quick. So I think those are the two kind of newer receivers that are going to be able to come in and make an impact. I'm really curious to see what Ben Ford does when he comes in. But overall, there's some plays I didn't go over. They did a really nice trick play that was like a double reverse pass. Some really good stuff there. There's one other play I want to look at real quick, and that's Cash Herrera. So Cash Herrera, we didn't get a ton of looks at him, especially like not really many deep throws or anything like that. I think that scramble pass we looked at earlier was him, if I remember correctly. But this one here is a really nice play. They called it a sack, but we can see it wasn't a sack. It's just they're trying to keep the quarterbacks from getting hit. So it's kind of more of a touch type situation for them. But he does a good job of seeing the pressure, feeling the pressure, and moving up in the pocket and finding the gap. And he immediately starts breaking the run. Now, right about here, they call it, but we can see if they hadn't called that a sack, which it wasn't, obviously, he was moving up in the pocket well before they would have sacked him. So, but right here, man, I mean, he's got a lane. He could have definitely made a move there, and I don't know, man. I think he's got that scramble ability for sure. So I'm excited to see a little bit more from him. I think Jackson Taylor had a pick six and then came out and had some nice pass plays right after that. So, I think Jackson Taylor is maybe picking it up a little bit slower than Cash Herrera. But I really like Jackson Taylor. I think he has a little bit more of that game manager mentality where he can control the field, and I think he's more of a leader. He's got that type of leadership personality. And I think Cash Herrera has a little bit more of the playmaker personality. So Jackson Taylor's a little better at throwing on the run. Cash Herrera's a little better at scrambling. Um, you know, so some give and take there, but they're both really great players. I'm excited to see more of them, and I hope that we can get ahead in some games and get them in some kind of late game situations where we're ahead, so that we can really see what these guys can do. Um, but I'm excited to see them learn throughout the year and next year come in strong. Hit me down in the comments. Let me know what you guys took away from the spring game. What kinds of things are you guys a little bit scared of? What kinds of things are you guys liking from this team? And how do you guys feel going into this season? Thanks so much for watching today, guys. On our next video, we're going to cover the run offense and defense from the spring game. We saw some really good things from the defensive line and the linebackers, and we also saw some good and some bad from the offensive run game. We're going to cover all of that, so tune in, and we'll see you guys next time. Go Broncos.